Color is a property of light, not of the actual object. When we see a color, for example, if we see a color like red, what we're really seeing is a bounce. Every other color except the color we see is being absorbed, while red is actually bouncing off that object and back to our eyes. White will reflect all color and black will absorb all color. There's two types of color systems we use in design. Additive system, color from light is used in this system, and subtractive system, color from pigments. And most designers often use what's called a color wheel. And this is a way to organize and think about colors as primaries and secondaries and tertiaries. A primary color is the three main colors. The secondary colors are the three colors right outside of the primaries, made between mixing two primaries. And then tertiary colors are a mixture of a primary and an adjacent secondary color. Complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel, and they often make each other look brighter and make each other pop. So often a designer will decide to use two complementary colors if they want contrast, intensity, or just to up the energy of the design. Color changes with light, but color also changes with its surroundings. How we perceive a color changes according to its surroundings. So designers often put colors next to each other to make sure that they don't change significantly when they're placed in an overlap or directly next to a color. So if you look at the top row here, you'll see that this is the exact same color in the center here, but depending on what it's next to, makes it look a lot different. The brighter and more pure a color is, the less different it will look, and it will maintain its purity and its intensity. So a brilliant color basically doesn't show much change despite different surroundings. Hue is the name of a color. For example, red, orange, green, yellow, purple, or blue. Spectrum is the range of visible color created when light is passed through a prism. There are not many hues, but there are unlimited colors. For example, pink, rose, scarlet, maroon, crimson are all colors, but the hue is still red. Value is the lightness or darkness of the hue. Tint is where you add white to a hue, and that's a high value color. Shade is where you add black, and that's considered a low value color. Most people can distinguish at least 40 tints of shades of a color. Blue has a darker value than yellow. A pure undiluted color doesn't change as much with the value and the thinning of the color or by mixing. Colors that are next to each other will have a different appearance, as will their value. Intensity or brightness of a color, also called chroma or saturation, is also a principle or property of color. And there are ways you can lower the intensity of a color. One is to mix with gray, the other is to mix with the complement. Sometimes there's a technique called visual color mixing used. And visual color mixing is an optical effect where you lay colors next to each other instead of mixing them like paints. For example, pointillism is the technique of using small bits of color next to each other to produce a color. Post-Impressionists did this beautifully. And we do this in the computer screen with pixels. Pixels are basically little tiny color lights shining out at us. Red, green, and blue lights shining at us mixed in various amounts create all the other colors possible. Also, there's other examples such as mosaics, where they use small pieces of tile next to each other to create a color, or weavers place colored thread together to make a new color. There's cool, warm colors, and so you distinguish between cool and warm colors. Warm colors meaning red, orange, yellow, and cool colors meaning blue, green, purple. Cool colors tend to recede, and warm colors tend to advance. And they also have their own sort of energy. So a warm color, for example, might make you feel more energetic, more happy, whereas a cool color might make you feel more relaxed, or it might even make you feel sad. And this is an example of cool and warm colors and the effect they create. Notice that dark blue is really receding into the background and that red is really kind of popping out. So there's a psychological effect. You can use color to make a visitor feel warmer or at home, and sometimes fast food restaurants really use this to influence their patrons. By using these warm colors, they make the patrons actually eat faster and maybe eat more or order more. So colors influence the way we feel both mentally and physically. For example, most professionals know and understand that by wearing dark or bright colors, black, dark blue, and red, that they are power colors and lend authority. People in blue rooms sometimes actually physically complain of being cold. Color context can make a difference. What about purple, you may say? Is it warm or is it cool? Well, this all depends on whether it has more red or more blue in it and by what it is next to. A colored area on a cool background will appear warmer in tone. The same color surrounded by a warm background seems cooler. Creating depth and volume. No group of artists has investigated and expanded our ideas of color more than the Impressionists. You can use warm and cool colors to create three-dimensionality because warm colors come forward and cool colors recede. Color is used as a design fundamental in the sense that you can create emphasis with color, you can divide space with color, because color is very dominant. Areas of emphasis in a work of art create visual interest and naturally have been carefully planned by the artist. Color can dominate and provide a focal point. Here's an example of that. The little yellow rectangle draws our eye in, even though it's smaller than some of the other shapes. An odd or bright color can be used to grab attention, either in art, fashion, or advertising. And color can be used to achieve balance, achieving balance within an asymmetrical composition. Asymmetry is based on the concept of using different objects on either side of the center axis. To create visual balance, the objects must have equal weight, interest, appeal, or attraction. And color is often used to do this. This is an example of that. Notice that the red circle really creates balance in this design. Or actually in this painting. It's a Joan Miro painting. Color and space. Color has spatial properties and can create depth. Distance can be implied by fading your objects to blue or gray. And there's actually an atmospheric effect to this. Dust in the Earth's atmosphere breaks up objects' colors, and rays make this bluish effect. So things in the distance often appear bluish in the atmosphere. And so we're used to that. We see that all the time, and that's called the atmospheric effect. Using color to emphasize flatness. Color can also flatten a space. High values in contrast come forward, and low values recede. And so look at this and see what's happening. You see the warm colors. There's sort of a visual play happening here, but what's happening is because there's so many red intense colors, there's almost a flatness occurring in this David Hockney painting. And there's definite color schemes used by designers and artists to create effect. There's complementary, triadic, and there's always this sense of color harmony. Any one of a number of color relationships based on groupings within the color wheel. Analogous is a color scheme of colors next to each other. Complementary is a color scheme of colors opposite each other on the color wheel. And monochromatic is a color scheme based on one color mixed with perhaps white and black and gray. Here's complementary and triadic as an example, using opposite colors on the color wheel. This is color discord, where There hasn't been a lot of intentional thought placed, perhaps, on the colors in relation to the color wheel. These colors are intense and they vibrate, but there's really no relationship on the wheel, and this creates sort of a discord effect. And sometimes it can really add interest to a painting. It makes the painting or the design feel intense and agitated and heightened. And there's colors in conflict. Certain color pairings are almost difficult to look at. Our eyes experience a conflicting feeling trying to look at them. They look as though they are vibrating. This is most intense with reds opposed to blues and greens. And when this vibrating effect occurs and this flickering effect, the effect is usually dependent on an equal value relationship and strong hue contrast. So color uses, ways to use color in painting. So there's local, which is where the color of an object is the same as seen in daylight or what we know the color is. For example, grass is green. And then there's optical, and that depends on the illumination. So what the object looks like under moonlight, candlelight, mid-daylight, that's optical color and not local because it's what it actually is in certain lighting conditions. And our brain likes to associate certain objects and certain things in nature with color. For example, we like to think that grass is green. If we try to imagine grass in our mind, we see it as green, even though in reality, grass is not green. It can be gray, it can be almost purple. Depending on what time of day you're looking at grass will affect that color. Arbitrary, no basis on reality, and colors are very subjective. And these can be selected for design reasons or aesthetics or emotional reactions. Often arbitrary color schemes are used to provoke and make people think. Heightened color, where something is intensified and exaggerated. So think in design, sometimes you see things that are overly saturated. That's a heightened color scheme. Color evokes an emotional response. And that can be very cultural. For example, in the West, yellow sometimes can be seen as a cowardly color, green, an envious color, red, a rageful color. And colors evoke these emotions. Warm colors give us a sense of warmth, happiness, cheerfulness. Cool colors, melancholy, sometimes depression. This is an example of Pablo Picasso painting called Crouching Woman, and you can see how the blue color scheme really affected the emotional content of this painting. Themes and context. Artists often use color to support, enhance, and add emotion to the subject or story of their painting or artwork. In this painting, for example, you feel a sort of agitation as if a violent action is about to occur, and the red in the background is heightening this and making us more agitated and more aware of the possibility of violence. With a change in context, similar hues can have different connotations. There's conceptual qualities of color. So there's definitely cultural differences, and that can vary between cultures. For example, mourning in the United States is black. The color would be black. Usually people wear black to funerals. In India, that color is white. In Turkey, the color is violet. In Ethiopia, the color is brown. And in Burma, the color is yellow to signify mourning. So always know that there is a cultural conceptual quality, and depending on where you are in the world, that can change. In the United States, brides wear white. In India, brides wear yellow. And in China, brides wear red. Symbolic color today. So symbolic color is less recognized or important than in the past. Now we can make a color mean what we want it to. For example, in the past, black for food was definitely a no-no. Today, it might mean premium food like caviar. And color symbolism, employing color to signify human character traits or concepts. Color symbolism is still really strong for some things like red, white, and blue for patriotism. The red and white stripes of the American flag shift to the black and white stripes of the prison garb in David Hollenbach's Indictment of the American Justice System. So I'll leave you with these thoughts, thinking of color. And as you start to work on your color logo and also your business card, think about what the colors you choose are communicating and be sort of strategic in what color scheme you choose. It's always good in design to experiment and to compare and contrast. For example, your color scheme could be monochromatic, just one color. It could be complementary, two colors that are opposite each other, or analogous, colors that sit side by side on the color wheel. Or you could experiment with one monochromatic color scheme, one complementary, and one analogous.